Coronation Street has quietly drawn a line under one of its most unsettling recent threads, as Andrew Hayden Smith confirms his exit from the Theo Silverton storyline. The actor, who has appeared in recent episodes as Pete, Theo's business associate and an apparently peripheral presence, has now completed his involvement in the plot. Yet Pete's departure lands with more resonance than a simple supporting character fade out. In a storyline shaped by coercion, manipulation and domestic abuse, even the smallest figures leave shadows behind. Theo Silverton's relationship with Todd Grimshaw was never built on love so much as control. Theo loved power more than tenderness, dominance more than connection. In the early scenes, the house smelled of takeaway cartons and fresh paint, the hopeful disguise of a new beginning. By the end, it reeked of excuses, fear, and the heavy silence that follows a slammed door. Pete, at first glance, did not look like part of the storm. His presence arrived gently, a laugh over dinner, a friendly slap on the back at a networking event, a hand on an arm that lingered just a second too long. The story invited viewers to see him not as a villain, but as a catalyst, a man whose existence complicated dynamics rather than drove them. But Coronation Street, like real life, has a way of rearranging its pieces. The affair, painful as it was, turned out not to be the worst of it. Far more corrosive was the way shame was weaponized. Theo twisted Pete's ordinary kindness into evidence, accusing Todd of betrayal, reframing empathy as guilt. Todd's humanity itself became something to be filed away, mislabeled, and used against him. On set, the weight of those scenes was felt. Television compresses time. Months or years of manipulation can unfold across a handful of episodes. But for the actors living inside those moments, the emotional stretch is very real. Pete's arc was never designed as a grand farewell. There was no dramatic monologue, no cinematic exit. Instead, he faded in the most human way possible. Through small decisions, awkward silences, reheated meals, late-night arguments. Behind the scenes, Andrew Hayden Smith found himself asking a difficult question: when does participation become complicity? A seasoned performer, Andrew's career spans decades. Biker Grove taught him how to hold a moment. Doctor Who taught him how to be small and brave under unforgiving lights. Each job left its own imprint, a quiet professionalism that sat behind his eyes like a series of photo albums. He loved the work. He believed in the power of a good storyline to teach viewers something real about the contours of a life. But Theo's storyline crossed a threshold. When the narrative adopted a found footage style, CCTV replays, confessional framing, intimacy turned into evidence, the shift was unmistakable. The episode was raw and deliberately uncomfortable. It showed not just violence, but the aftermath, the blaming, the rewriting of events, the slow erosion of truth. Theo in a hospital bed, pointing the finger at Todd, flipped the room. Suddenly, the story no longer felt episodic. It felt lived. The editing was merciless. There was no room for plausible deniability. Viewers were forced, in the quiet after the credits rolled, to decide whether they trusted what they had seen. Pete, for much of the storyline, had been useful to Theo, a visible other, through whom isolation could be enforced. But once the pattern was exposed, his function ended. And so did Andrew's. There was no press release. No dramatic announcement. Instead, Andrew posted a series of behind-the-scenes photos, a dressing room with a coffee-stained script, a corridor faintly scented with soap and catering food, a hairbrush left behind in haste. He shared a birthday message for the show, affectionate and understated. Then came the inevitable fan question: "Are you leaving?" The reply was simple. Absolute. All done now. 3 words. No melodrama, just punctuation. Exits on soap operas are often logistical, contracts ending, new jobs appearing, storylines tapering off. But sometimes, leaving is a moral decision. In a profession built on intimacy, there comes a point where an actor must decide whether their presence still supports something they can stand behind. For Andrew Hayden Smith, stepping away was less a rejection of the story than an acknowledgement of its natural boundary. Pete had served his purpose. The emotional core belonged to Todd and Theo. For Andrew, whose interests increasingly leaned toward reflective work, departure felt like a return to a life he wanted to curate more carefully. Pete's final scenes were filmed in a familiar kitchen, one that had hosted countless fake breakfasts over the years. He arrived in a new jacket, the kind worn by men trying to look serious. Direction was sparse. Laugh too loudly, pause too long, don't look away. In the final take, Pete sits at the table holding a contract while Theo performs affection like an actor rehearsing love. There is a quiet moment, barely perceptible, when Pete looks from Theo to Todd and finally sees the truth. For the first time, complicity feels like something that could, perhaps, be corrected. He stands. He apologizes. Whether he is forgiven depends on the cut. Then he is gone. After filming wrapped, the cast lingered. Some hugged tightly, some swapped numbers. Others joked about curry plans. Andrew packed away his costume, said his goodbyes, took one last photograph of the cobbles and their familiar tilt. Later, he uploaded a few more images, marking the show's anniversary with warmth and gratitude. Fans reacted as fans always do, with affection, speculation, debate. Some praised his nuanced portrayal of a man caught between awareness and inaction. Others questioned whether Pete's exit had been earned. But for those who followed the behind-the-scenes details closely, the moment felt like more than an actor moving on. It marked the end of a narrative handover. At the heart of the storm, Todd and Theo's story continued, sharper and more exposed than ever. The found footage episode functioned like a probe, revealing crimes that thrive in private spaces. Todd was left navigating the cruel paradox of being both victim and suspect. Theo clung desperately to a version of events that could no longer hold. Coronation Street, at its best, refuses tidy moral geography. It does not flatten pain into symbols. Todd was not turned into a monument. Theo was not reduced to a cartoon villain. Instead, both were left to live with the aftermath. In that context, Pete's exit became its own small moral gesture. He removed himself from the orbit of harm. It was not redemption, the damage remained, but leaving, sometimes, is not nothing. The cobbles endure by absorbing impermanence. Actors come and go. The street remembers them all. Laughter, arguments, friendships half resolved. In the weeks after Andrew's quiet farewell, viewers did not tune in to search for Pete. They watched instead for the ripples he left behind. On his final night, long after the lights dimmed, Andrew sat alone in the dressing room, scrolling through photographs, patterned carpet, chipped mugs, scribbled script notes. He answered one last message, all done now, and put the phone away. Some endings slam. Others settle into silence. This one did the latter. Outside, the cobbles glistened beneath street lamps. Tomorrow, someone else would boil a kettle. Someone else would spread gossip by the bus stop. Stories would find a new wind. And somewhere beyond the cameras, Andrew Hayden Smith stepped into another room, carrying the quiet satisfaction of having told his part of a story that mattered, and knowing when it was time to leave.